This is the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Your hosts are Seth Jacobson and Patrick Hyler.
Hi, I'm Seth.
And I'm Patrick.
Chapter 30 of Fires of Heaven, A Wager, and our symbol is the dragon banner.
And the wager is that Rand makes with Estion that he's going to save the city and make it in time.
Or is it Sulin that makes it in his place?
Well, she basically says, you have enough money. Estion is like, I'll wager you that. And he's like, well, I don't have any money. And Sulin's like, yeah, you do. You've got 2% of everything that was in the stone, which is a lot of money.
Yeah, I think it's Sulin.
Yeah.
But we'll get there.
Totally. We'll call it the foreplay episode.
A soft night breeze stirred across the small town of Einrod, then faded. Sitting on the stone rail of the wide flat bridge in the heart of the town, Rand supposed the breeze was hot, yet it hardly felt so after the waste. Warm for nighttime, perhaps, but not enough to make him unbutton his red coat. The river below him had never been large, and was half its normal width now, yet he still enjoyed watching the water flow north. Moon shadows cast by scudding clouds playing across the darkly glittering surface. That was why he was out here in the night, really, to look at running water for a time. His wards were set, surrounding the Aiel encampment that itself surrounded the town. The Aiel themselves kept a watch a sparrow could not pierce unseen. He could waste an hour being soothed by the flow of a river. It was surely better than another night, where he had to order Moraine to leave so he could study with Asmodean. She had even taken to bringing his meals to him and talking while he ate, as if she meant to cram everything she knew into his head before they reached the city of Cairhien. He could not face her begging to remain, actually begging, as she had the previous night. For a woman like Moraine, that behavior was so unnatural that he had wanted to agree simply to stop it, which was very likely why she had done it. Much better an hour listening to the quiet, liquid ripplings of the river. With luck, she would have given up on him for tonight. The 8 or 10 paces of clay between water and weeds on both sides below him was dried and cracked. He peered up at the clouds crossing the moon. He could try to make those clouds give rain. The town's 2 fountains were both dry, and dust lay in a third of the wells not fouled beyond cleaning. Try was the word, though. He had made it rain once. Remembering how was the trick. If he managed that, then he could try not to make it a drowning deluge and a tree-snapping windstorm this time. Asmodean would be no help. He did not know much about weather, it seemed. For everything the man taught him, there were 2 more that made Asmodean either throw up his hands or give a lick and a promise. Once, he thought that the Forsaken knew everything, that they were all but omnipotent. But if the others were like Asmodean, they had ignorances as well as weaknesses. It might actually be that he already knew more of some things than some of them, at least. The problem would be finding out who. Semerhag was almost as poor at handling weather as Asmodean. He shivered, as if this were night in the Threefold Land. Asmodean had never told him that. Better to listen to the water and not think, if he meant to sleep at all tonight. Sulin approached him, the shufa around her shoulders, so it uncovered her short white hair, and leaned on the railing. The wiry maiden was armed for battle, bow and arrows, spears and knife and buckler. She had taken command of his bodyguard tonight. 24 more Fardaris Mai squatted easily on the bridge 10 paces away. An odd sight, she said. We were gambling, but suddenly everyone was throwing nothing but 6s. I'm sorry, he told her without thinking, and she gave him a peculiar look. She did not know, of course. He had not spread it about. The ripples he gave off as Taverin spread out in odd, random ways. Even the Aiel would not want to be within 10 miles of him, if they knew. I thought I'd leave that there, but the next paragraph is basically a list of all the strange Taverin happenings recently.
Yeah, I'll talk about a few things before we get to that. You know, as there's the usual hint in the beginning of Moraine desperately trying to squeeze in everything before they reach Cairhien.
Yeah, Rand is absolutely right. She really does wish to teach him everything she can before he gets there, because she's pretty sure she's going to die after that.
Pretty sure, yeah.
Or be gone for an indefinite amount of time.
And then Rand talks a lot about the weather, which we know, like, basically the summer is causing issues, and that's going to be a problem.
Yeah.
Pull of the Winds is coming around, and we know Rand can't really do anything about it. He's pretty incompetent when it comes to weather. So the women definitely are the ones who are going to have to figure this out.
And Rand notes that the river is half as deep as it normally would be, and he can tell. And that's our hint there, that the weather's turning bad.
We're getting past the point where summer, it's just a normal hot summer, and now it's just turning into a kind of a hot fall and dry, and this isn't good, you know?
Yeah.
But for now, I think it's just that it seems like normal weather fluctuations. That no one said it's been the touch of the Dark One. The last thing we get is a little bit of knowledge leakage from the taint across lives, that Semirhage was almost as poor at handling weather as Asmodean. That's not something Rand knows or Asmodean taught him. That's something that Lewis Theron knew. But he's still not crazy enough to have created the voice of Lewis Theron in his head. So for now, he's just getting the knowledge.
I mean, I have the list of strange happenings here. Most of them are just kind of vaguely interesting, except I maybe one. There's like the ground gives way beneath 3 stone dogs and drops them into a viper pit, but none get bit, and those that do only have their clothes bitten, not their skin. And then a man, of course, trips over a stick or something and breaks his neck on a soft earth, which is also really unlikely.
That man was the man who made Rand his hilt.
I think
for
you're
his
right.
sword.
And Bael and Jiran had mended a blood feud between the Sharad and Goshen.
Which, funny enough, that's Bane and Chiad's clans.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point.
So now Bane and Chiad are no longer their marriage across as first sisters, across these 2 different clans is no longer a problem.
And they give a water oath.
Initially gotten together in sort of this like rebel fashion, sort of star-crossed lovers type thing.
And because they're maidens, they can associate that way, but they can't associate as in any other way, basically.
So just I'm not sure if that was meant as a Bane and Chiad nod, or if that was just coincidence, but those are the 2 notable Sharad and Goshen warriors.
Probably. It won't be too long before they do start considering marrying a man, well, between the 2 of them.
Gaul.
Rand brings up that he hasn't seen a Nyla or a Delin for days, and Sulin gives him the kind of non-answer. They'll return when they learn how to not play with dolls anymore, Rand al'Thor. And Rand's like, what the hell?
Those were the 2 Aiel who were supposed to be guarding him in camp, and when the night attack came, they ran off to fight Trollocs instead of protecting him from the Drakkar.
That's right.
So they've been punished by being put in pigtails, and basically the punishment we saw for Egwene as well, when she acted childish. That, like, give a doll, you have to carry around a doll and get your hair up in pigtails.
Same exact thing, yeah.
Yeah, exact same thing. And so then he's like, well, tell them they're grown women and they ought to act like it. And she's like, oh, I will. Oh, yes, I will. And it's like, well, that's what they've been doing the whole time. So she's more than happy to obey Rand when he's telling her to do exactly what she already wants to do. Other than that, and then Sulin's like, well, so much for obeying me. And it's like, yeah, she only really obeyed you because it was like your interests were in line with hers.
Rand is still wrapping his head around how this level of leadership works in Aiel culture. And he's had it explained to him before, but I do sympathize having to learn a culture full of traditions as, like, Avienda yells them at you in a quick clip is not really probably a very helpful way to learn.
Also, he spends way too much time looking at Avienda and not enough time listening to Avienda.
Rand could give someone like Sulin or a clan chief, Sulin being a high-ranking spear maiden, he could give her battle orders. But that's about the extent of it. He can't even really tell them how to execute the battle orders. He will just know that they'll be executed.
The chief of chief is not a Wetlander king.
Each of these little groups is kind of semi-autonomous, but they do respect the authority of those above them. In a moment here, a group of Terrans and Kyrianan soldiers arrive, being escorted by, I believe it's a large group of maidens. Oh, it just says Aiel.
Well, basically, these Kyrian that show up all become part of the Band of the Red Hand.
Right, and the Terrans, too.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and these are 2 of the young men that Maus played cards with when he was in the Stone.
Yeah, and later, Maricine, who's one of those guys who he calls forward, is mentioned as one of the captains in the Band of the Red Hand.
Gotcha. The Terrans are surprised to see Rand when they're escorted up to him. And at first one of them thinks that he's being held captive. And they're like, we don't know what's happening. They're just making us, we have to go see this Dawn guy, whatever. And Rand
I was like, he makes soap or something. I don't know.
It's very Darth Randy, although he's not really Darth Rand yet, when he says, this just says, plump, pink-cheeked lordling said, "My lord dragon, burn my soul, but have they taken you prisoner? They said they were taking us to some Dawn fellow. The Karakarn? It means something about chiefs, if I remember what my tutor said." And he goes on, this is a Dorian. There we go. And Rand just says, "I am he who comes with the dawn," Rand told them quietly, "and the Karakarn." And they had knelt immediately, and he tells them to stand. See what I mean about this is the Darthy Rand coming out.
A little bit.
I feel like it's getting there.
Now he's back with the Kyrian. He's back in the wetlands. He sort of has to, these are people who might betray him. He sort of has to take on a different aspect. And it's King Rand rather than Chief of Chiefs Rand, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And that's just taken to an extreme when he becomes Darth Rand. Emperor Rand, Like evil, the Emperor, literally, he shoots lightning out of his hands, Yes, good. Let your anger flow through you.
Let the hate flow through you. It makes you stronger.
It makes you Quendiar.
And Estion, one of the Terrans, if I remember correctly, asks Rand if he had sent this other group of Aiel against Cairhien. And Rand doesn't even quite know where they are, so Rand just says, "I did not send them." But he also says, so they've made it that far already. He explains that those are his enemies, they're called the Shaido, but the Wetlanders really don't understand anything.
Estion was with Matt during that first bubble of people,
and
too,
a Dorian.
Right? That's where we met him originally, yeah. Yeah, and a Dorian.
It's a group of Cairhienin officers and a small group of Terran officers that are kind of herded up together, and they spend some time discussing Cairhienin defenses, how long they think the walls could possibly be held, and this and that. Ultimately, they come to the conclusion that about a week, probably not more than a week, could they hold, and the only reason that they've held so far is because there have been a bunch of fires set all over the city, making it even harder to take for the Shaido.
Seems like it would make it easier.
Capturing something that's on fire?
A wall, yeah. Once the wall burns down, it seems like then it's harder to hold.
Oh, well, this was...
I guess you can't really go through there till the fire dies out.
Yeah, and I don't think the walls are on fire. They're just fires around the city.
Flames nearly took the city, Estion interjected. The Foregate, a city in itself outside the walls of Cairhien, had been mostly wood. And I also noticed Mangan's hanging out here. He's one of the Aiel who ends up getting hung because he kills a man with the dragon tattoos. Yeah,
it's a really significant moment for Rand. He has to do justice. He declared this law that you can't just go around killing people. There has to be reasons, and then there has to be a trial,
And that's not a good enough reason. He wasn't attacked. It wasn't self-defense. You can't kill a person for the tattoos, even if it's against your beliefs.
And Mangan is this Aiel that I feel like is kind of offered to us in the text as this makes a bad cultural misunderstanding, although, if I remember correctly, he puts the noose around his neck himself.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, he walks, he says, if that's the law, that's the law. And it just tells you how dedicated. It's one of those moments where you're just like, God, the Aiel are...
They're dedicated. Yeah.
Dedicated, yeah. And not afraid of death. They don't seek it, but if it's required.
We also hear that Cairhien is starving, and I think this is a Dorian speaking when he says, "I didn't think there are even rats left in the city." To just kind of highlight how bad the situation is. Because it's been bad for a long time, but he's saying, now it's much worse.
Even before the siege. And now they're under siege, and so, whatever little food was going into the city is no longer.
So, we see Rand and Ruark and Mangan kind of eyeballing back and forth, and I think they all sort of, it's not said aloud, but they all sort of understand that the only way to stop the people from Cairhien from dying of starvation is to kill the Shaido so that the Terrans can continue the grain shipments into the city, and all these people will be alive till the last battle, hopefully.
And so he's like, well, how long is it going to take us to get there? And, of course, Ruark's like, 7 days. And Etienne's like, that's about how long we can hold out. It's going to be close. And so then he, like, bets Rand this big amount of money that he's not going to make it.
Oh, yeah, and the Wetlanders also don't understand that, because the first thing they say is, well, that's how long it took us to get here, on horseback. Like, there's no way you're going to move an entire army on foot that distance in 7 days. And Rand doesn't really respond. He just kind of sets things into motion to start, and then someone asks him if he'd care to make a bet.
This is what the Aiel do. They are a nomadic people. They travel, and they travel fast, and they use the fact that they don't have horses and the fact that people have this weird ability to keep going long after most animals would collapse.
Humans in general, yeah.
Yeah, we are incredible endurance animals, and so we can just keep going when other animals, and we can eat while we walk and drink water while we walk. We don't have to stop. All the things that make humans just incredible endurance animals that, like, yeah, we can't go as fast as a horse over a short distance, but they're not going a short distance.
Right before that, it's maybe important to mention that Maricin and Darakain, the two Cairhienans, swear their lives to Rand on their knees. Basically, I guess, for his pledge of assistance to the city of Cairhien.
And as far as I can tell, we never hear from Daracin again. But like I said, Maricin ends up in, or Darakain, we never hear from again. But Maricin ends up in the Band of the Red Hand. So I'd assume they both do. Adorian
is one of the lordlings, as Rand calls them in his head, who says that he'll send a message back to Cairhien. He'll travel there to warn the defenders or to tell the defenders that help is coming. He says, I suppose if I made it out in one piece, I can make it back in, my lord dragon. Forgive me if I offend, but would you care to wager, say, 1,000 gold crowns that you can really come in 7 days? Rand stared at him. The man was as bad as Matt. I don't have 100 crowns of silver, much less 1,000, and Sulin broke in. He has it, Taran, she said firmly. He will meet your wager, if you make it 10,000 by weight. Adorian laughs, and he loves it. And then he also says, and worth every copper if I lose. Come to think, I'll not live to collect if I win. Because he's saying, like, if I win this bet, then I'll be dead. So,
right. So, in a way, he's just sort of paying Rand to come take the city, or come save the city, which is kind of clever if you think about it. He's like, here's a bunch of gold you can have if you save our lives.
I don't know if it was accidental or if he just doesn't believe that this is possible, so he wants to make a little bet out of it, or, yeah, if he's trying to goad them into moving faster. But also,
I mean, a little bit of everything, yeah, I guess.
It kind of highlighted to me that Rand doesn't have money. He doesn't really have his own money.
He's never carried any gold.
You don't think about it, because he has such nice things, but people just give him stuff.
And the entire time, even the Aiel don't really use much gold. Like, they trade. You see them carrying, like, bowls of gold. They don't have,
that's
like,
why Sulin says by weight, because I don't think she could actually get 10,000 gold crowns. But she has that in wealth, like the maidens have it. And Absolutely. Then she patiently explains to Rand that a 10th of each 5th that is taken goes directly to the Karakarn. So that money is his, and they're presumably just holding it for him for whenever he wants it, but he never asks for it, so it just sits there.
Because, like, he was given some nice stuff when he was in Shinar, and that lasted him until he basically took over.
You mean his clothes
stone.
And stuff?
Yeah. And then once he took over the stone, he was the king of Tyr, and they gave him everything he needed. He never would buy anything in Tyr. and then he teleported to the Aiel, where they don't have money. So yeah, they're at no point, he went from basically being broke to being a king. So.
But he's a broke king. He doesn't have anything. And I just thought it was interesting kind of statement on his position that although he is a king and the chief of chiefs and the Dragon Reborn and all that, he doesn't actually have a lot of stuff. And he has to even be reminded that he's entitled to it by his followers.
Yeah, he didn't buy his way into power.
Sulin accepts the bet for him because she knows that he'll win. She knows that her maidens can make it there in 7 days or less.
And I mean, in a lot of ways, he never really uses the money. You know, he, like you said, he uses it for tax purposes. Like he never buys himself stuff. Like Rand never needs things because he's so individually, he's so freaking powerful. And then he has rooms in every palace. What is he going to do? Buy rent someplace?
Yeah,
like no.
The more I think about it, it's almost like a monk-like existence where he just like reads and works out. It's like all he does, and then occasionally like hatches a plan, goes to combat, and then reads and works out some more.
Right, and he's given like what he needs to survive, but that's it.
Yeah, clothes, food, water, but healthcare, but that's it. I mean,
healthcare.
What do you call that?
Healing.
Aes Sedai following you around is damn good healthcare. Okay, the more I think about that, the more problematic that statement is.
Because chances are they're going to use you for something that's going to kill you. Aes Sedai will keep you perfectly healthy until it's time for you to die.
And the lordlings just kind of, they start taking horses away from some of the lower-ranking people that are with them to create a string of remounts to get to Cairhien as quickly as possible.
Because that is the only way to actually get somewhere faster than walking people, is to have multiple horses, so you can actually leave the ones who get tired, who are carrying you behind.
Or, yeah, I've read that if you have a group, you know, say half a dozen horses to yourself, you can just rotate which one you're riding, so that they don't tire out as quickly, and you don't kill them.
They still probably need to stop and eat more often than a human. But I guess if you can get them all, you know, if it's a day or two, you can just take them all that way.
I don't know anything about horse care.
I don't either.
Someone emails about that. I will totally read it. I will be interested.
But I don't know how long you can run an unburdened horse before it gets too tired.
Edurian dismounted all his men, taking one of their horses and stringing the others together by their reins, along with Estion's. No doubt he was saving his own for the final sprint through the Shaido. Marison and Darracane did the same with their men, though it meant that the Cairhienin had only 2 spare mounts apiece. No one seemed to think that they should have any of the Terran horses. They clattered off together westward, at a trot, with a Jindo escort. Carefully not looking at anyone, Estion started to drift toward the soldiers standing uneasily in a circle of Aiel at the foot of the bridge. Mangan caught his red-striped sleeve. "You can tell us conditions inside Cairhien, Wetlander." The lumpy-faced man looked ready to faint. "I am certain he will answer any questions you ask," Rand said sharply, emphasizing the final word. "They will only be asked," Ruark said, taking the Terran's other arm. He and Mangan seemed to be holding the much shorter man up between them. "Warning the city's defenders is well and good, Rand al'Thor," Ruark went on, "but we should send scouts, running. They can reach Cairhien as soon as those men on horses, and meet us coming back with word of how Couladin has disposed the Shaido." Rand could feel the maiden's eyes on him, but he looked straight at Ruark. "Thunderwalkers?" he suggested. "Shemad Khand," Ruark agreed. He and Mangan turned Estion. They were holding him up, and started toward the other soldiers. "Ask," Rand called after them. "He is your ally and my liege man." He had no idea whether Estion was that last or not. It was another thing to ask Moraine, or even how much of an ally he really was. His father, the High Lord Torian, had plotted against Rand enough, but he would allow nothing close to Couladin's ways. Ruark turned his head and nodded. "You tend your people well, Rand al'Thor." Sulin's voice was flat as a planed plank. "I try," he told her. He was not about to rise to the bait. Whoever went to scout the Shaido, some would not return, and that was that. I think I will have something to eat now, and get some sleep." It could not be much more than 2 hours to midnight, and sunrise still came early this time of year. The maidens followed him, watching the shadows warily as if they expected attack, hand talk flickering among them. But then, Aiel always seemed to expect attack.
Sulin is pissed at Rand. He has taken the maidens out of the fight, and she does not like it.
You know, I didn't catch that until I read that just now. I thought Sulin was saying you tend your people well because he makes certain that Ruark says in a statement that basically this Terran lord won't be tortured for the information or mistreated in any way.
I think it's a bit of a double meaning. I think she's sort of saying that on the surface, but...
Yeah, I didn't catch the other one is that you should have picked your honor guard to...
Yeah, stop protecting us. That's not what we're here for. Let us help you. And that, as we know, I mean, that becomes a huge issue later on when he puts his own life in danger.
Yeah. They eventually beat him up about it a couple times. It's more than once, right?
Pretty badly. I think one is really bad. I don't think they beat him up a second time. But yeah, you can feel the sarcasm just bleeding through the page.
Yeah, and Sulin is, mean's not the right word, but tough mofo. Stern, that's a better way to say it. Female John Wayne with a spear.
Go ahead, partner. Make my
day.
Wheel of Time TV show announcements. The last actual announcement was like that Roose Bolton was playing Tam, but there's been some rumors since then, but nothing really concrete.
There's always rumors. I have trouble even keeping up with it because half of what everybody's posting is just like, I think this will be what happens based on no evidence. It's like, well, why waste your time? Just wait and see. It's the only way you're going to know.
This isn't Wheel of Time speculation podcast, you know? It's Wheel of Time spoilers podcast. We take the cold hard facts. And headcanon.
Yeah, it's also like just out of my wheelhouse to like even think about what actor would be best for which role and why. I don't know if I could name 10 actors on my own. Well, I'm sure I could, but it would be a struggle.
Really? I mean, are you shocked that a couple of book nerds aren't that big into TV shows and actors? And
it is the most frustrating. It's one of the most frustrating things in day-to-day life when people are like, oh, I saw this movie recently, and then they just start listing actors, and you're like, yeah, I don't know any of those, but if you want to tell me about the movie, and then they just start listing other movies that those actors played in, which I won't be able, like, may or may not have watched, but that's not helping me. Like, I don't know who this person is. And even if I have seen that movie, it still won't have stuck.
Yeah, sometimes if you give me a character in a movie I've seen, that's about the only thing. Like, if you're like, oh, this person played, you know, for example, Roose Bolton in Game of Thrones. I'm like, okay, yeah,
vaguely
I saw
remember
Roose
that,
Bolton.
yeah.
I kind of know who he is. Pike. Like, I'd never heard of her.
Me neither.
Rosamund Pike, thank you.
But that's not about Rosamund.
Like,
it's about me.
No, just that I haven't seen movies, and Gone Girl wasn't something I was aware of. And I mean, I guess I'd seen her in James Bond in the 90s, but that was hardly, you know, that's hardly something that, like, you're like, oh, great, she was a Bond girl. Like, so she's good looking, but she's also a great actor.
I am excited to see the show.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I'm just not going to speculate about the show that much.
Yeah, it seems like mainly a waste of time.
Star, last night I was drinking Stickman Brewing Company made Midnight Joker, an Imperial Chocolate Coconut Porter, which was tasty. And it's got the lyrics, the altered lyrics.
Did they really get the coconut in there? Could you taste it?
You know, yeah. It's typical chocolate coconut powder. Chocolate coconut beer. It wasn't too overpowering. Sometimes they like hit it with just a bunch of sweetness, but here it's just some subtle coconut. They did a good job with it, I gotta say. One of the better sweet porters.
Can't say I've ever had a beer with coconut in it. It does sound pretty good. I like coconut.
It's a good It's a decent flavor. It's hard to get. A lot of times, the coconut beers that I've had, the home brews that I've had, there's just no coconut there, or it's just so overwhelming that's all you taste. So it's one of those things where, like, when you have a chocolate coconut porter, that's three very hard things to balance. So doing it well is hard, and they did it pretty well. So cheers to Stickman Brewing. Where are you located?
They're a local one, right?
I would assume. Tualatin, Oregon. Yep. Tualatin. So that's basically Portland. Suburbs. There's so much good beer here. I can't, I've stopped even trying to keep track of the breweries.
I heard quite a few breweries went out of business or closed some locations recently.
It was kind of inevitable. There was an oversaturation of the market, yeah. And there's going to be some consolidation and closing of the low-end stuff. It doesn't mean there's not still a ton of tasty beer. Although Anheuser-Busch and InBev have fucking bought a ton of them. Like 10 Barrel. I didn't know 10 Barrel was Budweiser.
Anheuser-Busch. I didn't know that either.
Nope, they got bought out.
I can't say I've had one of their brews, Star. Pro disc golf players. Man, how do I get that job?
Well, first of all, you drink a lot of beer. And then you throw a lot of plastic.
They could put me out there
around.
for like the comic relief, like the guy that's not really that great.
Thank you for listening to the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Rate us in the Apple Podcast app or
support us on Patreon. Is that good enough?